Hello, everybody. Megan here. I just wanted to pop in before the podcast started and let everybody know that we are needing to make a schedule change for the Flunking the Written podcast. Unfortunately, due to an increased work schedule and other responsibilities, I'm unable to maintain editing a podcast a week. So, starting with this episode, Flunking the Written is now a bi-weekly podcast. So there won't be a new episode next week, but there will be one the week after that. With that out of the way, Kimberly and I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and we hope you enjoy this episode of Flunking the Written. Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every other Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
Alright, Kim, we are about to start our discussion of Killed by Death, which was written by Rob Deshotel and Dean Batali, and it was directed by Darren Serafian. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced. This is the only episode that he directed, but you can definitely tell that it has that different vibe to it, right? It is one of those episodes that feels very out of the Buffy world.
This episode, I've never watched this episode and paid attention to stuff like I did this time. There are some massive plot advancement issues.
Yeah.
Mainly to do with, science, the way a hospital works. And also, I'm going to say really Joyce a lot of times during this episode because I wrote the words really Joyce many, many times in my notes.
Yeah.
So just be prepared for that phrase because I'm going to say that a lot.
All right, I'm ready. I'm buckled in. The DVD blurb's pretty basic. It just says, while hospitalized with a severe case of the flu, Buffy battles a demon that sucks the life out of sick children. I think that this is kind of one of those blurbs that ruins the twists that they were going for, but at the same time, the twists that they were going for weren't that great, so I'm not really mad at it.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure we'll get into it in our discussion of the episode, but the whole, maybe it's just in Buffy's head part of the episode really fell flat for me.
Yeah, it lasted, 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the whole, maybe it's the doctor who's really trying to help everyone. Mm-hmm. That lasted 10 seconds as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it starts in the cemetery.
Surprisingly, a Buffy episode that starts in a cemetery.
Yeah. Buffy's hopping a fence or some kind
climbing
of
over a wall. Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, so she chose probably one of the hardest ways to access one of these cemeteries while she's sick. Well, she's Buffy. She just doesn't take any easy shortcuts or anything.
For the record, I wouldn't be able to do that at full health, much less with the flu, so.
But yeah, she's wandering through. You can tell she's kind of out of sorts. And she hears a noise and goes to stake Xander. And she doesn't, and I'm disappointed. No, I'm kidding.
It's actually, weird for her to, stake without knowing for sure. So that's kind of a weird.
Blame the flu.
Yeah. And Xander says that his life flashed before his eyes, and he's got to get him a life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have a big, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And Cordelia and Willow are there as well. Mm-hmm. And they're
substituting
apparently
for Buffy.
apparently trying to patrol in Buffy's place, the three of them. Because Buffy is sick, and she insists she feels fine. The ground's moving a little bit, and she's dizzy, but she feels fine.
Mm-hmm. Is this our first instance of seeing the other kids patrol in Buffy's absence?
I think so.
Because I know Giles has mentioned a couple of times that he's gone patrolling, but I don't think they've ever patrolled without her. But it does happen throughout the series.
Yeah, I think this is the first time.
Yeah, which it's funny because they ultimately, I guess, save Buffy at the end of this encounter. So props to them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Cordy's explaining that half of the school is out with this flu that Buffy has. And that leads to Willow saying that, you just need to take the night off. It won't kill you. And Buffy's like, yeah, but it might kill someone else. Which is part of this episode that I think works in bits and pieces, but it's not in here enough. is this idea of coming off of passion and the death of Jenny. And Buffy feeling super guilty about that.
Little pieces of guilt here and there. Mm-hmm. Then Buffy tells him to, go away because Angel's not going to kill anyone else. And then Angel shows up and it's like, just one more.
And he tackles Cordelia.
He's not Buffy.
Which makes me excited for many reasons, because their future friendship, I know, is not foreshadowed in any way, but maybe Angelus is just like, yeah, she seems like a good one to kill. And we all know Angelus shows his affections by killing people.
True. So her and Angel fight.
Buffy, not Cordelia.
Well, not Cordelia. Buffy and Angel fight. And he says that her being off her game is taking all the fun out of it because, she's really not doing well. Then he hits her in the face and says, nope, still fun. He jumps on top of her and is about to bite her. And then all of a sudden, Willow puts a bag over his head and Xander punches him. And so basically they all save Buffy from him. In this scene, though, Xander says, take a walk, overbite, to Angel. Mm-hmm. That line is not in the script. It was an ad lib by Xander.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like the fact that the Scoobies come together on this, and that, you even have Cordelia and Willow with the crosses out, ready to go. Xander gets a good hit on Angel, a knee to the face kind of hit, and knocks him back. Mm-hmm. And so, the Scoobies save Buffy in this scenario, and she is out of it. She starts to be like, I told you guys to leave, and then she passes out. So
yes, she passes out. Then we have the theme song, and we open back up with Xander bursting through the hospital doors, holding Buffy in his arms. Mm-hmm. And Willow and Cordelia with him, and he goes running in, begging for help, and says that she has the flu, she fainted and fell, she's sick, make it better. I will go ahead and say, right off the bat, that this is the creepiest hospital ever. There's never anyone around.
Yeah.
And it's always dark and weird things like random wheelchairs in the hallways. That where does that happen at?
Yeah. It's
the only one that is as creepy is the one in the flashbacks that Buffy was in as a child.
So I'm not sure when I'm gonna detail all of my feelings about this hospital, but I have feelings about this hospital, and mostly I just think that it was a bunch of cobbled together mess. What I discovered about this episode is that this was originally intended to be a season 1 monster of the week that they ended up having here, and they kept pushing it back, and so then they had to shove in a bunch of other plot elements into this episode with Angel and coming off of passion. So that's why that stuff kind of feels shoehorned in. And in a lot of ways, it does kind of feel like a season 1 Monster of the Week, where it just kind of has a lot of twisty-turniness, but overall, the actual conclusion is a little underwhelming.
We've got a couple of those at the end of season 2.
Yeah.
We've got another couple of those coming.
Yeah, as much as I love season 2, it's definitely got some stinkers, and I think this qualifies. But what I will say, I like the vibe that this episode is going for. I think ultimately it doesn't do what I wanted it to do, but I liked aspects of this kind of being in Buffy's head, and that this was Buffy's vision of what the hospital was like, and this was how Buffy interpreted all these things around her. And they played with that a little bit, but they didn't really go that direction. They ended up just being like, nah, it's just going to be a Monster of the Week. But the fact that the flu made her so disoriented, that this is how she perceived everything around her. And I think that could have been a really cool way to tackle this episode, and would have explained a lot of the directorial decisions that were made. But ultimately, it's just a weird Monster of the Week.
Yeah, I really like this episode. I've always really enjoyed it, and I actually think that for the majority of the episode, the bad guy in this one is one of the creepier ones.
Oh yeah.
Until that weird eye thing at the end. But before that, before it gets cheesy, he's really creepy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until this time watching it for this podcast that I realized how many problems the episode has. Mm-hmm. Watching it critically.
Yeah.
Before, I've always just enjoyed it,
That's what that critical view will get you.
Yeah.
So yeah, the doctors are all concerned, saying that, yeah, she's definitely running a high-grade fever and has possible fractures, and they need to take her to Trauma 1, and they rush her out, leaving the Scoobies behind. Willow says she's going to call Giles and instructs Cordelia to call Joyce, and Xander is left there kind of
staring at Buffy through the window.
Regaining his composure while looking at Buffy through the window. Oddly enough, there's some things I don't like about Xander in this episode, but overall, I really enjoy Xander in this episode, so...
No.
This is definitely, though, like, this first bit. Everything, basically, until, Buffy kind of has her first, like, moment of being of herself. The way that these scenes transition, like, I literally just wrote in my notes transition here, because it just has this weird, like, just fade. It has this fade effect that it transitions into the next to show that passage of time that they've been waiting. Giles is now there. Joyce arrives. The doctor comes out and says that Buffy is going to be fine. And all of that. And then it, like, transitions again. It does this, like, weird thing where it's kind of like the passage of time. And it feels very different than any Buffy episode we've had up until this point. And I kind of like the tone that it's setting here at the beginning. Again, it doesn't go the direction I'd wanted it to, but I like kind of some of the decisions that are made here to show this is going to be kind of a different episode of Buffy, right? That's what it feels like when you're watching it.
A more serious episode, I guess, even though it ends up not really being.
It's just a monster of the week. That's the thing.
So they're all sitting in the waiting room, and Giles is there, and Joyce comes rushing in, wanting to know where she is, and Giles replies, still in the emergency room. Joyce immediately ignores the fact that her high school daughter's librarian is here while her daughter has been hospitalized with the flu, hanging out with her daughter's high school friends, and acts like this is something completely normal. And it's just like, I want to see her. This is the first time I wrote, really, Joyce.
Yeah.
But, like, really? Because I think if my child's librarian from their school was there, I would think that's odd.
Yeah.
I might have a few questions. Like, why are you here? Why are you always hanging out with teenagers? So the doctor comes out.
He set a precedent, though, because he showed up when Joyce got bit in Angel in season 1. So,
which was also weird.
Also weird. But she's just like, maybe that's just the thing he does, and just continues to put those blinders on. Oh, Joyce.
Oh, she is all kinds of blinders. She's basically a horse in this episode. Yeah, the doctor comes in and basically explains that she's going to be okay, but she has a big fever, so I want to keep her here. She's got some healing to do. There's a scene here that was cut where the Giles asks if she was hurt badly, and the doctor's like, the injuries from the fall were minor. She's got a couple of cracked ribs and a sprained wrist, which I'm assuming were from the fight with Angel, not from her fall.
Yeah, that was all Angel.
Yeah, says, I'm more concerned about her fever. And Joyce says, she said this morning she was feeling better. And the doctor says she will be, but she's still suffering from exhaustion and dehydration. And Willow says, I keep telling her that Yoo-hoo is not a fluid replenisher. And the doctor says, come on, I'm sure you want to see her. And that exchange was cut out. So, yeah, she's being wheeled on a gurney out of the ER into a room. And she starts talking. She's kind of out of it, which is weird because she was fine earlier, and they haven't given her drugs. They're just going with her fever has made her crazy now. But she had that fever earlier and was fine enough to know what was going on. But now she's like drunk.
Yeah. Well, and it also doesn't make sense, like, later on when she purposefully induces a very heavy fever so she can fight the demon, where she's
I have lots to say about that.
She's just like completely fine there too. I mean, and able to take it out. I feel like this is one of those scenes that I really like in isolation from the rest of the episode, and I like the idea and the direction it's going in. I feel like this episode would be really interesting watched, like, right before or after. I don't know what the order would be, but in conjuncture with Normal Again from season 6. Like, I feel like that would be an interesting experiment to try sometime, and to watch those two episodes back to back. Because especially this moment here, where she's all confused and she's kind of just like super, like, she just has that air of innocence to her in this, where she's just like talking about how they're in a hospital so they can't sing, or just like random gibberish. And she plays this, Sarah Michelle Gellar plays this very similar to the way she chooses to play the alternate reality Buffy in Normal Again. So it's one of those moments where I think if you really wanted to analyze it as if this was one of those alternate reality relapses, that you could play with that account if you wanted to go down that rabbit hole, which I probably will at some point because I'm weird and overanalyze this show to death. But I didn't do it this time around. But I think it would be a fun experiment sometime.
Just a little tidbit here, but one of my least favorite Buffy episodes is Normal Again. Mm-hmm. And it's all because of one moment in the episode.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I don't want to get into it too much now because we'll get to it many moons from now. But yes, I think it is really fun to watch Buffy through that lens and have that experimental idea of what if it is all made up, and see episodes like this and like watch it completely differently than you would watch it normally. And I think that that's some of the thing that makes this episode still kind of fun for me to watch, because it kind of excuses a lot of the randomness. But obviously, I don't think any of this was ever linked up or intentional in any way. But it's something I started thinking about, because in this conversation here, she starts shouting about vampires. And Giles kind of tries to cover it up, and, you know, the Scoobies are like, oh, it's just her fever, yada, yada.
Which would be the second time I wrote, really, Joyce?
Yeah, and yeah.
Because
Joyce,
not only has she dealt with someone not being able to come in the house because of a spell, but she's kind of seen things.
Yeah.
And now her daughter's talking about having to kill the vampires, and I'm just like, really? Mm-hmm. You're not gonna, like, think anything of this?
Yeah.
And there's also a line here where the Dr. Wilkinson says that she's been like this since she came in.
Huh. Yeah.
So.
Like, and it's weird. It's confusing to think about. This was, again, one of those examples where Buffy specifically talks about vampires in front of Joyce, and Joyce doesn't bat an eyelash, which is funny, again, compared to Normal Again, and thinking about the fact that in that episode, Buffy reveals that she was in a mental institute for a short period of time when she first became a Slayer because she wouldn't shut up about being a Slayer.
And now Joyce is all like listening to her talk about vampires and stuff and not concerned at all.
Yeah, like should immediately draw back to that time. So that's one of those things. Again, we'll probably discuss that way more at length than Normal Again. But that's the first thing that caused me to draw those parallels. And now I'm just like, ooh, my gears are working.
At this point, they actually give her medicine.
Yes.
To help her relax. And she kind of begs to not stay, and is scared. And they go ahead and take her to a room, and Xander kind of comments about how weird it was to see Buffy scared. And Joyce tells about why Buffy hates hospitals. Because when she was a little girl at 8 years old, her cousin died in a hospital, and Buffy was with her when it happened. Now, before we get into all that...
Because we will.
Buffy had a cousin, at least one, whose name was Celia. I'm assuming that since she had a cousin, she had at least one aunt or one uncle, possibly an aunt and an uncle, or two aunts and two uncles. If this child had a parent, at least one. So where are all these family members later? Like at Joyce's funeral, or if there's aunts and uncles and a cousin that she knew well enough to play with as a child. Where are all these people? Where are these family members? And I think at one point, Buffy mentions a grandma.
I know that somebody made the curtains in the Summers household. I can't remember if it was a grandmother or an aunt, but I know, I remember that being a specific tidbit, that they mentioned some family member making the curtains in, maybe a deleted scene that you mentioned. I don't know. That's vivid in my memory. But yeah.
Yeah, but I can't help but wonder where are all these family members when Joyce dies, and then later when she's trying to get custody of Dawn and financially underwater and stuff. There's family. There's more family than just her dad who disappeared. And it just, every time that they mention it in the early seasons about extended family members, I'm like, well, where did they go?
Maybe the monk's spell that made Hank the worst also made everybody else in Buffy's family the worst, and made everybody super estranged.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly.
So,
Okay.
Celia. This whole cousin bit. First of all, the delivery that Joyce gives, and I love Christine Sutherland. I think she's great. I think she's a wonderful actress. I think she's knocks it out of the park more than once in this series. Like, she delivers some fantastic performances. This delivery is so flat. It's so weird. First of all, my note is like, why is she not in that room with Buffy? Like, why is she not in that room with Buffy? Because I'm pretty sure that she would be allowed, as the mother, to be in that room with Buffy. And she's just standing out there delivering this weird, dry exposition about why Buffy doesn't like hospitals.
Right, because she might not be allowed to go in the room with Buffy. Because apparently in this hospital, parents aren't allowed to be with their children.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Like, ever.
I forgot about that clause.
Yeah.
That weird fine print in the
hospital. Not allowed. Or all the children in this hospital are from the orphanage. One or the other. I don't know. We'll talk about that here in a little bit.
But yeah, can we just agree that this whole weird thing with Buffy's cousin is
weird
and also unnecessary? Like, there's nothing. I was listening to the Still Pretty podcast earlier today on this episode, which I do occasionally before we record our episodes, because I think they have some really good insights. And they mentioned that they're like, you could cut out this entire storyline about Buffy's cousin and the episode would play exactly the same.
Yeah, it would. And you don't really need that memory to inspire her to want to kill this demon. I mean, she's Buffy.
Yeah.
She's gonna do it anyway. That's her job. You know, she doesn't need the background trauma and inspiration to do it.
It's not great. So Joyce says that she needs to go and call Hank, and Giles says that he'll show her where the phone is. And
then she thanks Giles for being there. And again, I'm like, really?
Yeah, this is probably, as many awkward scenes as there is in this episode, I think this is like the most awkward scene, this exchange between Joyce and Giles.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't even know what to do with this scene. Yeah, she's just there talking about how, like, she is really grateful to him and to everybody and blah this and blah that. And then she's just like, oh, I'm so sorry about what happened to Miss Calendar. And then talks about, oh, I babble when I'm nervous. It's just, Joyce is just so off in this episode. Nothing about Joyce makes sense.
Well, she does claim that she babbles when she's nervous.
Yeah. Which, I'm sorry, but her daughter's the Slayer. She should be babbling all the time.
Yeah. And then we're back to Buffy's friends looking in the room. And Cordelia talks about her friend getting a nose job there and how bad it was. And that while Buffy's here, she should have a thing on her face taken care of. And everybody just kind of ignores her. Then we go to later that night when there's an IV drip in Buffy's arm and she's sleeping kind of fitfully. She's dreaming. Mm-hmm. And she opens her eyes and sees a creepy little boy in the doorway.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's really creepy. And in the description, he is supposed to be still, expressionist, and Stepfordian. Think Christopher Walken at age 10 is what it says.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, our Slayer, who is apparently got an incredibly high fever and broken bones. Well, cracked bones, because cracked ribs and a sprained wrist after a fight and all of this, gets out of the bed in her perfect makeup and lipstick that is just perfect. Mm-hmm. And sees a mysterious figure passing by the door. And this guy, I'm going to say it again. He is, in my opinion, one of the creepiest Buffy bad guys.
Oh, yeah. Like,
he is so creepy. Now, at the end, they make him really cheesy with the eye thing. Because I'm like, what? That was not necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, he was actually scarier before they did that. But this guy's really creepy. Like, I could imagine being terrified of seeing him down a dark hallway or something. Yeah.
Oh,
Ugh.
yeah.
No.
He is the worst. And I remember, like, genuinely being scared watching this episode when I was, like, 11 or 12 when I first watched it. Like, I did not enjoy watching this episode the first time I watched it. And I had pretty thick skin because I had older brothers and they watched scary movies all the time. And I just kind of went along with it. But this one got to me. So, an interesting note, when Buffy wakes up, you see the clock change from 2:26 to 2:27, and that's obviously repeated later. But the funny thing is that in the wide shot, where you see Buffy in bed and the clock in the background, it is 12:15.
Oh, oops.
Whoopsie! But yeah, when she's doing this kind of like getting up and sees the boy and then the demon walks by, this score is just delightful. I love the score to this episode, and it's actually a different group. Sean Clement and Sean Murray did the score for this episode, and it is one of my favorites. Like, I just love the creepy vibe that it has. And yeah, there's no real music to talk about in this episode, so I'm just gonna delight in this score. Because this whole build up, and then just the creepy, like, hissing giggle that the demon does as he walks by the door. I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah.
So yeah, Buffy follows. She rips the IV out of her hand and follows, walking down the hall, and you have all of these, like, funky shots when it flashes back to young Buffy in the hospital hall.
Yeah. Which is completely empty and devoid of people.
Yes.
Including medical staff.
Yes. But yeah, like, this would work for me if they went the direction of, like, this is in Buffy's head, if it actually went that idea of she's creating this monster because she wants something to fight, because there are certain things that you just can't fight, even as the Slayer. And I like the little bits that they played with in this episode, but they didn't end up going that direction. Ultimately, they had something that she could fight, and she beat it up and she won, and it's a, regular episode of Buffy. But, like, this would have played so much better for me, and all of these weird inconsistencies about the hospital, about the weird time looping thing that we're about to experience, about everything else would have worked so much better for me if it was an idea of this is in Buffy's head. Because I could totally buy this flashback if this was that story, right? That this is Buffy's memory of that. If she felt isolated, like there was nobody there to help. Like there was nobody that could have done anything, that there was nobody in that hospital that would have saved her cousin. Like, I could have.
Well, there wasn't. The only people in the entire hospital were Buffy and Celia.
But, like, a child's perception or a child's memory of that is skewed. And I think that works. But again, I don't think that they played with that enough for that to be the way that you watch the scene. I think you actually, when you think about the scene, you're just like, why is there no staff there? And the way that the current hospital, like Sunnydale General, that
also
they're in,
has no staff?
nobody, or is just really darkly lit. Like, hospitals aren't lit like that. Like, it's all for the atmosphere. And I think it would have been better if it was just, this was Buffy's perception of what this hospital was. Would have been a much more logical episode. And you probably could have still done a demon angle where a demon had gotten into Buffy's head and made her think that way. That's very much what normal, again, is. Like, gets into her head and makes her think that this alternate reality is real, kind of deal. I mean, you could have done that story and still had a Monster of the Week, but it's just, when you make it just a Monster of the Week, then all of these scenes that are more for the tease, more for the twists and turns and the whodunits, they don't work. They're just, when you watch it the second viewing and really think about it, you're like, none of these scenes make sense. And we're about to get, like, one of our major decoys for this episode, which is the random guard, who plays a pretty big part in this episode for not really having any part in this episode.
Yeah, I have lots and lots to say about the security guard, too. As we continue. He doesn't seem like he would have passed the security clearance to work in a hospital, just off the top of my head. But yeah, they make him look really creepy, kind of spying on Buffy as she walks down the hall a little bit. Yeah.
And this is the weird time loopy thing. Like I'm already all kinds of confused because what this does, and I think it works well if this was what they were doing, but this is Buffy wakes up again, and it is again the clock is changing to 2:27, and that's when she gets up and pulls the IV out of her hand. I got that wrong. But then she wanders down the hall, and the guard leans out and kind of just like peers after her as she is walking up to the children's ward, and the orderlies or nurses or whatever their appropriate title is, are rolling out a body and saying they hate it when they lose it, the young ones. But yeah, there's a moment before this that I think is brilliant direction for like the creepy vibe that they were going for. But again, what kind of hospital is this kind of deal? But there's a moment where Buffy's walking down this incredibly dark hall, and the camera keeps panning to show the different patients in their room as Buffy is just shambling down the hall. And she's wrapped in this like big robe that's oversized, and it's like clinged to her, and it's like she's walking down this hall in a straitjacket, which again, something that I noted, something that the Still Pretty podcast brought up, and something that again I think makes me want to like watch this episode with Normal again. It's just a really stunning shot and really cool what they've done here. And then the episode ruins it later on. But like this moment, when I was so into this episode when I was watching it this time, until I was definitely not into this episode anymore. And I can't like pinpoint exactly when the turn is, but probably when Buffy, like, decides that she needs to induce herself with a fever again. Or maybe when the doctor's attacked. I don't know, there's some point in this episode where I'm just like, it's no longer interesting to me. But the front half here, the direction that was done to do all of these great shots of showing Buffy feeling isolated is really well done stuff. I wish that this person who directed this episode, this Darren Sarafian, had a hand in directing Normal again, because man, that would have been an interesting vibe.
This episode feels like, to me, like a director started the episode and then quit, and another director took it over and then quit, and then a third one took it over.
It does. And like, it does like have those weird like tonal shifts from scene to scene.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, we were going to go this way with it. Nope, we're going to go this way with it. Nope, we're going to go this third way with it. You know, it's like no one could decide how to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, after the dead child is wheeled out of the children's ward, Buffy kind of peers in and sees two doctors arguing over the treatment of these children and how they need to proceed.
Yes, in front of the children. Because that's where you have discussions like that. And when they talk about how they're doing a thing to try to help the kids, and the other doctor is, it's not good, you know, wait, you're going too fast. And then Dr. Backer is like, I have the parents' permission. And Dr. Wilkins is like, well, they are just desperate because their kids are sick, which seems odd because we never see a single parent in this entire episode. And there's like half a dozen kids in this children's ward. Then again, we never actually see a nurse either. Like, these kids are always alone in a children's ward together, and actually at a later point managed to escape the hospital.
I mean, I wasn't there yet. But there is, in fact, not only this unsupervised children's wing, but it's also a children's wing that apparently has basement access that is not alarmed nor locked.
In the same room, yes.
Like, actually off of where they're sleeping, yes.
Yes, and that seems like a very smart idea. Also, these kids are not supervised in any way at all, ever. Like, this doctor comes in occasionally to give them experimental drugs and then leaves. We never see a parent. We never see a nurse. And it's just like, what is going on in this hospital?
But that's okay, because then we get creepy kids.
Yes. Which he's only creepy at the very beginning. After that, he's not. Yeah.
After that, he's an artiste.
Yeah.
But yeah, Buffy turns away, and these two kids just chilling. I mean, they're unsupervised, so they just have free roaming rights, so might as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like, nobody's watching them.
Yeah. Little boy Ryan's all like,
He comes at night. The grown-ups don't see him. He was with Tina. He'll come back for us. Who? Death.
And then that's the end. Because apparently she doesn't ask any other questions. She just leaves after hearing that.
Well, she figures out his name's Ryan at some point, so.
Yeah. Then we are at the lobby of the hospital, and Angel comes in with flowers.
White roses, in fact.
Yeah.
White roses, which I looked up.
I know you did.
The meaning of white roses include purity, innocence, grace, and humility. White flowers have long been popular for weddings. They have also come to represent new beginnings and budding love.
Okay.
That's so sweet
Wonder
of
what we were trying to say. Yeah.
He's also whistling Ode to Joy, which is delightful.
What happens here is one of my very favorite Xander and Angel interactions.
Oh, it's great.
I love it.
It's so good. This is some of the best Xander that we've gotten up until this point. And honestly, some of the best Xander of the series. This is really top shelf Xander.
Visiting hours are over.
Well, I'm pretty much family.
Yeah. Why don't you come back during the day? Oh, gee, no, I guess you can't.
If I decide to walk into Buffy's room, do you think for one microsecond that you could stop me?
Maybe not. Maybe that security guard couldn't either. Or those cops. Or the orderlies. But I'm kind of curious to find out. You game?
Buffy's white knight. You still love her. It must just eat you up that I got there first.
You're gonna die. And I'm gonna be there.
Which Angel does die, but Xander's not there.
Yeah. He just missed it. He was there earlier, but he had to leave.
Yeah. But yeah, this is one of my favorite things between Angel and Xander. It's so good.
Uh-huh. And like, here's the thing that I will say about Xander, and I've mentioned it a couple of times. He has a crazy amount of courage. And sometimes it's stupid courage. But here, I think he knows that even if Angel goes for it, right? Even if Angel goes for it and does something to Xander, possibly even kills Xander, the likelihood of him getting to Buffy after that, because of all of these other people around, is so slim that he's willing to take that risk. He's willing to put himself as like Buffy's human shield, basically, in this moment. And it pays off and it works so well. But then, again, Nicholas Brendan does stuff every now and again that just get me. But when Angel leaves, after kind of having just that moment of slight aggression, where he like kind of like hits him with the flowers, like hits him in the chest, and then he's just like, just tell her I stopped by, and then walks away. He takes a moment to like recover. Like, he was so like, petrified.
Yeah.
And it's so good.
Yeah, it's really good. So then we flash back to when Buffy's a child again, and she's playing with her cousin. Apparently they had play dates, so the family was close enough for that to happen. And they are playing where Celia needs help under an avalanche, and Buffy is Power Girl.
Yes!
And rescues her.
I love it. I love it. I just have in my notes Buffy the comic book geek, because Power Girl is a real superhero, and Buffy's you know, we have little hints of like Buffy being just a big old geek when she was growing up.
Yeah, the whole Dorothy Hamill obsession.
Dorothy Hamill obsession, and now Power Girl later on. She makes a reference of James Bond movies and Star Trek in one single sentence. Like, just so much nerdiness just dropped in one sentence later on. Not
necessarily that Buffy's character was supposed to be a nerd, but that a lot of these episodes were created and written by nerds. I was saying.
No, my headcanon is Buffy was a huge nerd until she decided, oh, I'm going to be the popular girl. And then she became the Slayer, and then it all went to hell.
Yeah. It doesn't really work that way, though. When you're a huge nerd and you just get to decide to be popular. That's not what happens.
It does when you're Buffy.
I guess it does. Can happen if you're Buffy. Okay, so that happened, and then we are back in today, and the doctor has come in to visit Buffy. apparently Buffy has not been bothered by a nurse all night because nurses don't work in this hospital.
Well, her IV is back on, so either Buffy knows how to do that or somebody came and reattached it, or everything that happened last night was just a dream. It's uncertain.
True. I didn't think about that. That's a good point. I have spent nights in the hospital before, mostly after I had each of my children, and they come and bother you like every 30 minutes. So, yeah, this doesn't seem accurate to me. Then Buffy tries to leave, and the doctor's like, nope, you can't leave, even though your fever is gone. And it was a flu, and you're perfectly fine now. We have plenty of room in this hospital, and don't have to have this bed for anyone else.
Yeah, even though we know that this is a huge virus that swept like half the high school is out with this.
Oddly, though, half the high school is out with this flu that is sweeping Sunnydale. But the only people who seem to have it are Buffy and half a dozen children in the children's ward. And then her friends come to see her, and Xander brings flowers, and Willow earns Buffy's undying gratitude by bringing completed homework.
So in the script, does it actually say that he brings flowers? Because he brings balloons and then makes a comment that they're flowers.
Oh, yeah, he does, doesn't he? Yeah, he says flowers for my lady, and Buffy's like, these are balloons. Yeah, that's in the script.
Okay. I was just wondering. He tricked you.
He did trick me. He tricked me. I thought they were flowers. And then Cordelia is like, yeah, I didn't know that we were supposed to bring gifts. I was out of the loop. And Giles has the best line. He's like, well, it's traditional among people. And I just love it. It's so great. And it's very classic Cordelia. It's like, no one told me I was supposed to bring a gift. So Buffy then says that some stuff happened and I want to talk about it. And at this point, there is actually a nurse here for the first time to check her IV. In the script book, however, she just looks into the crowded hallway and decides that the room she's in off the crowded hallway is not private enough. So they go into the crowded hallway to talk. But at least they changed that for the actual episode, and it was because a nurse was in her room. So then they're walking outside in the courtyard, and Willow's pushing Buffy, and Buffy starts explaining what all had happened, and they basically try to scully her. They're like, yeah, I don't know, you're sick. And they make a little bit of fun of the death reference. I've got in my notes that you should always believe Buffy.
Yeah, like, truthfully, we've said this before, and I'm sure we'll say it again. When Buffy has a hunch, it's likely to be right.
She ends up telling them that, you know, there really is something real here, and that Kid Ryan was afraid of something, so I'm going to find out what. And then they offer to help, just like always.
Yes. So, before we move on from this,
yes,
can I talk about everything that is wonderful when it comes to Cordelia?
Oh, yes.
Cordelia is so good throughout this episode, but
Cordelia is awesome this whole episode.
This moment here, we talked about like our favorite Xander moment earlier. This is one of my favorite Cordelia moments of all time. And there's so many great Cordelia moments. But when she just lays out this whole plot line, which is my preferred plot line, where she's just like...
So this isn't about you being afraid of hospitals because your friend died and you want to conjure up a monster that you can fight so you can save everybody and not feel so helpless?
Cordelia, have you actually ever heard of tact?
Tact is just not saying true stuff. I'll pass.
And it's so good. Cordelia is so amazing.
Yeah, and her delivery and everything is just awesome in here. But yeah, that is one of my favorite Cordelia lines as well. Then we have Cordelia and Xander sneaking into a file room in the hospital because those aren't kept locked.
Yeah.
To find out how Tina died, who actually died the night before. So her information is already like done and put together and in the file room in a file cabinet. It's not on a desk somewhere waiting for someone to do the autopsy and then sign off and all that. It's done.
It's done. It's done deal.
So Cordelia's complaining about people taking advantage of her, and Xander says, "Yep, Buffy almost died so she could put you out." And Cordelia, I didn't want to be the first one to say it. I love that too. So they start looking through the file cabinets to find the little girl that literally died less than 12 hours ago. Records. And the security guard grabs Cordelia's arm and says, "What are you doing here?" Because he's just hanging out in the file room somewhere. I'm guessing he's hiding so he doesn't have to work. I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know. Like, I don't think, like, there's any way that he would have been able to open that door and enter without them hearing. So he just, like, pops out of nowhere, which is funny.
Yeah, he was just hanging out in there.
Which is funny because Xander and Cordelia had that whole conversation. But he doesn't know Xander's there because Xander's down at the other end of the room. So...
yeah, it's weird. I'm telling you, there are so many issues with this episode when you watch it critically. So then we cut to the library with Giles and Willow, and they're discussing where to start looking. And Giles is like, yeah, I don't really know. And he's kind of trying to play it off. And he says Cordelia may be homiletically insensitive. I did not know what that word meant, so I looked it up.
Ooh, you looked up something this time.
I did. I was like, I don't know what that word is. I looked it up. It had 3 definitions, but the one that applies to this one in the context is epic. It just means big or epic or whatever. So she may be epically insensitive is what he said.
Yeah. It's a very Giles word to use.
Yes, instead of epic. He said, you know, she's also possibly right. Willow kind of talks him into believing that there's a chance that Buffy might be right because they live on the Hellmouth.
I love that. I mean, it's just like Giles lays out all of this. And again, like, I wish this was the direction that the episode went in because I think it's more interesting. But Giles lays off all of this as like, you know, Buffy can't fight death and disease. And it's natural for Buffy to create a defeatable opponent. And then he has this beat where he's like, especially after Jenny, which is another little like peppering in of passions, right? But then Willow's just like, true, but we still live on a Hellmouth.
Yeah.
Turns out.
So maybe we should check it out anyway. They kind of come up with the idea that the kids are afraid of a regular person because they can see the regular person's true face. And they decide very, very quickly to start investigating the doctor.
Yes. And then we cut to more amazing Cordelia.
Right? How? Oh my gosh, I could not have done this without, like, cracking up. Like, she's talking to the security guard and basically flirting with him and coming on to him. To keep him distracted.
Yeah.
And one of his comments, he says, "This is where the action is anyway. I'm all the time restraining people." And in my notes, I have like, why? That wouldn't really be your job. Like, why is he always restraining people?
I didn't even like process this. I was just so mesmerized by Charisma Carpenter's performance in this, I'll be honest. I didn't even like process, but there's just so much about the security guard that's weird, but this scene of him is hilarious. And when you really start splitting out everything that he says and talks about in this, it's so, like when he talks about having to like decide on what his motto's gonna be, it's so funny. And like I didn't even really process it while I was watching it. I was like going back through this scene and I was just like, oh my god, that is hilarious. And I didn't actually pay attention to this because I was so mesmerized by Charisma Carpenter. I was just like, she is so good at just making you think that she's super into you.
I don't understand why he would think that, but I still don't get the whole restraining people thing.
Like that's so like that is not what a security guard would like. I mean, I could understand that there are people in a hospital that need to be restrained, but that's not really what the security guard does.
Yeah, that's not the security guard's job, and we'll talk about that more later. Then Xander kicks something, and Don like grabs his billy club because that's what he's gonna do. Is start beating somebody with a club. Cordelia kind of convinces him not to go check it out by telling him he has the most perfect nose she has ever seen, and kind of starts coming on to him stronger. And then we go to outside, and where Cordelia joins Xander, and so we never really see how she gets out of that situation. I don't know. Does she claim she has to go to the bathroom and she'll be right back?
Gives him a fake number? Like, how does this work? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
and Xander's first comment to her is, "Can you make just a little more with the touchy gropey?" And my notes basically say, or you could say you're welcome, because she just kind of saved his ass.
Yeah. Like I said, there's still some stuff about Xander that's not the best in this episode. It is one of Xander's better episodes, but yeah, this exchange is a little rough. Before we get into the breakdown of this exchange, though, I want to backtrack about this security guard and this weird misdirect that they do with the security guard, where he talks about the doctor. Because Cordelia's just like, oh, I bet you see a lot of tragedy, like that little girl. Which props to Cordelia for seizing the moment, right? Like,
try to get some information.
She's just on it. He says that the Dr. Backer is a great man, and he understands the truth about children, and it's that sometimes they die. And I both hate and love that line so much.
Yeah.
It's such a it's meant to be another creepy misdirect, but again, I think it works with the direction that I wanted this episode to go in so much, is that sometimes people just die, and you can't fight that. You can't slay the flu, kind of deal. It's just sometimes people get sick and die, and they play with this so much. And, like, I kept watching this episode this time, because I haven't seen this episode in years, honestly. Like, I have not watched this particular episode of Buffy in years. And I was watching this and seeing all of these hints and being like, I don't remember any of this. Like, how much they peppered in this concept of Buffy against death itself. And, the title of the episode, the fact that the children call the demon Death, and they have that whole back and forth, that funny back and forth earlier when she says that, he called it Death, and he's like, oh, like the real Death? It really plays with this expectation, and like this moment here could have been like really, really cool. Like a really cool payoff. And they could have almost had like that weird scene at the end where it turns out the security guard is like the wise sage the whole time. That weird creepy guy who's just like, yeah, I do have a sexy nose. But he's actually like, yeah, sometimes there's just things in life that you can't help. I mean, it just happens. That's what I wanted. I wanted the security guard to be the hero at the end of the episode, to sit down and give Buffy counsel. This is probably why I never went into screenwriting. Everything would just be a big joke at the end.
Yeah.
So then we have Cordelia and Xander being jealous.
Yeah, both being jealous of each other.
Yeah. I like this exchange. Not so much for this exchange, but what comes after this exchange. But this exchange, I think, works well enough to show that Cordelia and Xander are still Cordelia and Xander. Even though that they're public with their relationship, they're still gonna be constantly, bickering and whining at each other. And I also like that Cordelia calls Xander out on his clear infatuation with Buffy still.
Which never, ever goes away.
Yeah, like, it's so good. It's Cordelia is just, not only is she so confident in herself that she's willing to do this and not have it really impact anything, like she's willing to just say, hey, this is weird, don't come at me for like fake flirting with this guy while I'm trying to like save your ass and get information and just be, just excellent at every single way, because that's who I am. Like, her self-confidence is just oozing in every part of this.
Well, she's not wrong.
She's awesome. She's way out of Xander's league.
Oh, yeah. So Buffy actually comes into the kids' ward where the kids are very quietly reading or playing with toys in their beds, which is, what kids do. And she's there again with no supervision. And any adult could just walk right in to the children's ward, which does not seem safe to me. But Ryan is at a table, he's coloring, and Buffy goes over and they talk, and he is drawing a picture of death. Mm-hmm. It's a really good drawing of what happened, and Buffy kind of tells him, look, I'm not going to let it get you. I know grown-ups don't believe you, but I do, and I fight monsters, and, I'm not going to let it get you. And then Ryan says, you can't fight death.
Except you can, because you make it a monster of the week. Oh, I'm so upset at this episode.
Well, I mean, he says you can't fight death, and again, she apparently doesn't question him anymore. She just gets up and walks away. A lot of these scenes seem like they were just cut off in the middle.
Yeah.
And that happens in all TV because, you have to further the plot. But it seems in this episode it was really extreme.
Well, and I think the reason why is, like, everything ends on, like, a suspenseful note. Like, everything. Like, yeah. It's another suspenseful note. It's another suspenseful note. And then it just gets to a point coming up shortly where all of that tension that's been building this entire episode just evaporates and it's gone. So, yeah, from there, we cut back to Willow and Giles, who are looking into Dr. Backer's history, and Willow's just like, yeah, he's got reprimands for controversial experiments and procedures, and there was a malpractice suit, but that was apparently dropped, and Giles makes a comment.
Factor in Buffy's observation that he gives her the Wiggins.
He's just so uncomfortable using that word, it's great.
Yeah.
So this is when they set up that it's definitely, the doctor's our lead suspect. And then we cut to the doctor researching and just like, yes!
And here's my problem with this. Apparently, this doctor's office with his medical books and his desk and his degrees on the wall is also his research lab. Where all his equipment and stuff is, and he apparently has no research assistants. He's doing it all himself out of his office.
Yeah, like, truthfully, everything in his history is earned. Like, they kind of set it up as like, oh, he was a good doctor. I'm just like,
No.
I think he was a shady doctor who managed to find a hospital shady enough for him to work on.
Right? This hospital is so shady. Like, he basically has a lab in his office that I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that it is most likely not following, like, OSHA guidelines for a science lab. I don't know what they are, but I'm sure they exist, and this place is not following them. I'm willing to say that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
With 100% certainty.
I think you're right.
Yeah. But he gets up and he pulls some vials of medicine out of a mini fridge, writes something on them, and then goes back to his files and smiles and goes, yes, and starts writing really fast.
I've cracked the code.
Yeah. And then we have this cute little scene that I just love.
Oh.
There's no speaking or anything. It's so great.
This is the payoff for that argument scene, right?
Yeah.
This is great. And it's also, in a weird way, the payoff for that little joke earlier where Cordelia was like, well, nobody told me to bring gifts. Because here's a moment where just her, out of awareness of what Xander's doing right now, of just constantly being at the hospital to be that meat shield, right? In case Angel comes back. And she just brings him a lovely gift of donuts and coffee and just sits it there, and they just exchange a look. And the little look that Xander gives her, it's so sweet. I adore it. It's the littlest thing, but it makes me not hate that previous scene as much now because of this little exchange where they're just like,
I love it.
We can argue and hate each other and call out each other's bullcrap, and then we can be like, aw, here's some donuts and coffee.
Yeah, and she just gives it to him and sits down and starts reading her magazine like, here you go, and I'll stay with you for a little while, I guess. But yeah, it's a very sweet scene. I love it. And until I watched this to this time to prep for this podcast, I don't remember it. Like, I didn't remember seeing it in beforehand. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, because it's such a quick scene.
It's so short, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so then we are back to Dr. Backer, and he comes out of his office and starts walking down the hall, and then Buffy steps out and follows him.
Now watching. Buffy's the creepy security guard.
Yeah, and then we go into the children's ward where the kids are asleep, and Dr. Backer goes into the room and puts medicine from a syringe into a kid's IV. Mm-hmm. Now look, this is not how this is supposed to happen. Like, I get that he's the doctor and he can decide on the medicines and stuff. And like, this is a breakthrough for him, but so he might be really excited about giving it to the kid himself. But you gotta like make marks or notations in a file and talk to people about this and stuff. And you got to let the other medical staff know what drugs you've given this child in case they need to give them something that's going to interact with it. You can't just go sneak it around in the night, putting stuff in kids' IVs, even if you are the doctor. You can't. So anyway.
Yeah, I think this is really the point where the episode falls apart for me in a lot of ways, because
this is where it falls apart.
Well, yeah, because beforehand, all of those things could have been leading to this idea of Buffy trying to create this monster and everything like being all in her head. And so all those weird inconsistencies and all those things, you're just like, oh, that would never happen. This hospital doesn't make any sense. But it's all in Buffy's head, right? But then you have this weird throwdown with the demon, the invisible demon, and the doctor. And, you know, you had this buildup of, well, maybe it's the doctor, and immediately resolved, right? Because we know it's not. But then, it's just another thing to note. But this doctor seemingly, I guess, disappears. We don't really know what happens to his body, but his blood splattered all over that room. And, like, the kids are just, again, left in there to escape the next night. There's no, like, increased police presence or anything, like, indicating that any investigation has happened. Buffy just kind of nonchalantly says the next morning, oh, he's dead. So not only is this hospital shady, but so is all of the police department and everybody that has everything to do with anything official in Sunnydale. We've already mostly established that, but I think this episode really puts that final nail in the coffin kind of deal.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But yeah, Dr. Guy's attacked. We can't see him. The kids apparently can see him at this time. We can see its shadow, because artistic.
And, like, the kids can see him every single night, right?
That's assumed, yeah.
So their fevers aren't coming and going. Mm-hmm. Their fevers are just a constant thing that never stops.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I told you I had problems with the science of this episode.
And then the demon kills the doctor, throwing him out of the room. Buffy's approaching the room. Apparently doesn't hear any of this. I mean, there's screams, there's slashes, there's all this ruckus going on. The kids are like, I mean, they're not really screaming, but they're making noise still. And like Buffy's just casually walking up to this room like nothing's wrong. Just still snooping. And then the doctor's flung out of the room past Buffy. She runs to check on him and then is immediately knocked out by an invisible presence, which then decides to drag away the doctor, and I guess not take a kid that night. I don't know. Like, the demon itself also doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, and, like, so Buffy sees the doctor get killed by the bad guy. And tells, like, the rest of the Scoobies. But, like, how did the rest of the hospital staff find out? Did they just assume that this doctor's disappeared?
Well, his blood is literally all... That's my problem. There is blood all over that children's ward.
Right.
Just splattered everywhere.
And, like, he was slashed to death. Like, wouldn't somebody be concerned that a doctor was slashed to death right outside the children's ward? Meanwhile, all these children are in bed screaming, and not a single adult in this hospital has come to check on them. Like, I mean, I get that they're not pushing call buttons, but they are, in fact, screaming. I would say, where is the nurse's station? That's a good question. Where's the nurse's station in this hospital?
Non-existent. Budget cuts.
So the next day, we're in Buffy's hospital room, and we're discussing everything, and Giles is like, oh, wait, you were right after all. And Buffy says, I know, which I love. Giles and Willow are talking about how they think it's probably Dr. Backer, and Buffy's like, nope, it's not him. And she tells them about how he's dead, this thing killed him, and then shows them Ryan's picture that he drew. At which point, Giles looks at the picture and then gives Buffy a really weird look and looks back at the picture and says, is this your work? And she's like, no. Which I find hilarious because that's not in the script.
Oh.
Now, I don't know if they ad-libbed it or what, but it's not in the script and it's hilarious.
I find it hilarious because Giles has no place to criticize someone else's artistic talent. Because we've seen Giles' drawings later on in this series.
Not yet. We haven't seen them yet, though.
But we know with the fully spoiled Flunking the Written podcast that, in fact, Giles is a much more terrible artist than Ryan is.
Yes.
Giles is
actually,
bad.
The drawing you're talking about, I actually have on a coffee mug. But okay, Buffy claims that she saw this happen, but the monster was invisible. And Giles is like, well, it's invisible, but the children can see it. And they start trying to figure out why the children can see it and she can't, and why she saw it the other night but can't now. And okay, then Joyce walks in and says, "Good morning. Oh, it looks like I interrupted a secret meeting." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, really, Joyce? Really?" She's like right there and still misses it. Right there. And then they very unconvincingly try to tell Joyce that she didn't interrupt a secret meeting. Joyce is not concerned that the school librarian is still at the hospital with her daughter and her daughter's friends just hanging out in her hospital room. She still doesn't think this is weird. Like, honestly, I would start wondering if maybe like something inappropriate was going on between the librarian and my daughter. I would be like, Buffy, I need to talk to you about good touch, bad touch.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, she's shown that she has a thing for older men because Joyce knows something happened with Angel. So yeah, like concern should be had.
Then Joyce tells Buffy that she can go home, and Buffy flips out saying, "I need to stay. I have to stay another day. I can't go home yet." And Joyce, who is fully aware that her daughter hates hospitals so much that the first night she had to stay, flipped out and tried to fight all the personnel to go home, basically just says, "Oh, okay, I'll ask the doctor if you can stay." Because it's a hotel, you can extend your stay.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime you want. It's just everything that happens in the scene is with Joyce is so weird.
Yeah.
And none of it makes sense. She asks no questions about why the librarian's still here, why Buffy wants to stay in the hospital even though she's better and the doctor's going to let her go home, even though she hates hospitals. She just leaves to go see if it can happen.
Yeah. Also, as a single mother, don't do that. Hospital bills are expensive enough. You don't need to extend your stay. She would be like, heck no, you're going home. I'm not paying for that.
Apparently it works, and the doctor says, yeah, we don't need that bed or that personnel. She can stay.
Yeah. Why? I mean, to be fair, no personnel's actually tending to Buffy or anybody in the hospital.
That one nurse did. That one time. So then they start trying to decide what they're going to do and how they're going to research this. And the thing that they want to do first is get a mugshot of the bad guy to find out what he looks like. And Buffy decides she's going to check Backer's office. And Willow is going to go with her because she knows about the medical stuff because her and Xander used to play doctor all the time. And they all kind of give Xander a look, and Xander's like, no, she's being literal. She used to diagnose me with stuff. He says I didn't have the heart to tell her she was playing it wrong. And Willow's like, wrong? Why? And looks at Buffy and says, how did you play doctor? And Buffy says, I never have. Now, in the episode, this just seems like she's confused about the question, like, never have. Is she supposed to act embarrassed?
Mm-hmm.
And like she's lying, but I didn't get that from her delivery.
What I did get out of it is that Cordelia doesn't believe Buffy because Cordelia kind of just like raises her eyebrows at Buffy after she says that. At which point Giles is like, let's move on. This next scene I adore, and it's just a walk and talk, but I adore this walk and talk because you have this, you know, the silliness. Xander's gonna be Sentry and he's gonna take out the demon if it shows its face or whatnot, and Cordelia's like, it's invisible. And all of that back and forth. But then Giles is just like, well, yeah, you two, you know, stay alert. And Xander's like, no, finally the demon takes priority. Cordy, go with Giles. And Giles is just like, why do I have to? And then he's just like, oh, wait, good thinking. But I like this moment for Xander, oddly enough. Because Cordelia, we talked about in the last episode, that was her transition to being like, I'm accepting that I'm a member of the Scoobies, and that's the full transition. But I think in this moment, this is like Xander backing her up on that decision, being like, no, Cordelia is going to go and help you research. She's part of this team. She's not just like going to be stuck on the sidelines. You know, she can go and help. But it's like a really subtle thing from Xander, but I think it's actually one of the things that I picked up on this time. It's just like, yeah, Cordy can do stuff. Cordy's part of the team. This is when Cordelia brings up the let's go tact guy, which again,
well, because she had just gotten a lecture on being tactful.
And again, she's just confident enough to be like, yeah, I know I'm the person that nobody wants to be around. Whatever, it's your loss. Let's go. Let's do our job. I love her. I wish we could all be as confident as Cordelia Chase.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So then we go to the children's ward and we see Ryan look out into the hall and he sees a security guard standing there looking creepy and then sneaks back into the room, which I don't know if the security guard is there to guard the kids so they don't leave or what, but it just is odd. Yeah, it's just odd.
Well, I was trying to think. I remember seeing that scene while I was watching the episode. I was like, that's weird. But then I was trying to think of the timeline after the round, and I think it's like a lot happens between then and when the kids actually bother to sneak out. So it's not like the kids checking to see, wait for the security guard to pass, and then they're going to like go into the basement or whatnot. It's like the kids just casually every now and again poking his head out and watching the security guard walk by.
Yeah. So then we have Buffy and Willow in Dr. Backer's office, and they're going through all his stuff because his office is not locked.
Even though it's also his research facility. Yeah.
Also his research lab. He is dead or presumed missing. The doctor who has taken over the care of the children, since he is dead or missing, has not come into his office to go through the files and the lab stuff. It's just basically normal, and they go in and start going through it. Yeah, so that happens.
Yeah, like nobody even bothered to clean up his coffee. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And then Willow reads through his stuff and says that he was trying to inoculate the kids with a controlled dosage of the same virus they already had, raising their temperatures to burn the fever out of them. That does not sound right to me. Like, I don't know a whole lot about science and medicine and stuff, and I could be completely wrong, but that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't fully understand why it would work that way at all. Like, let's just make them sicker so they'll get well. And it's like,
right.
I understand the idea of antibodies and things like that, but
their body's already making antibodies.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't, you shouldn't want to like increase that process. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. And also, like, okay, so he's just trying to save these kids when this flu is basically affecting half of Sunnydale.
Yeah.
But it's these kids that he's trying to experiment on.
Yeah, they're the guinea pigs. They got the
it
parents'
doesn't make
consent.
sense. But apparently Willow says that it was helping and it was starting to help the kids. And Buffy's like, until that thing stopped him. So, yeah.
Yeah. There's another little guilt trip moment for Buffy, which this is consistent. You know, she talks about how it's another person that she wasn't in time to save. And coming off of Jenny, I did note Willow talks a little bit about how it's weird going through the doctor's things. And I'm just like, oh, God. Willow has had to go through all of Jenny's things because she's had to take over that class. And it's just one of those things that if they were really going to feel the impact of passions, that would have been a moment that they should have explored more. And it's just a line that I read more into than's really there. But I really wish they would have had just a moment there where Willow would have been like, yeah, you know, but I guess I'm kind of used to that because I've had to go through Jenny's things or something like that. Just something where she has that acknowledgement.
So then we are in the library with Giles and Cordelia, and they're doing research. And Cordelia's basically getting on his nerves, asking what each demon does one after the other. It's a really cute scene. He finally gets fed up and is like, that demon asks endless questions of those with whom it's supposed to be working, so nothing's getting done. And I just love it. And Cordelia, she's just like, oh, wow, there's a demon for everything.
I really like when they put Cordelia and Giles together. And there's like a couple of times where, like, earlier in this episode, Giles even says, you know, yeah, Cordelia's the worst, right? But she may be right. Like, I think that there could be something there. I would have loved to have seen Cordelia and Giles interact after Cordelia matured quite a bit. I think that would have been a really interesting...
Oh, after she was on Angel for a while?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we never did get that. I feel cheated that we never got that.
I really feel cheated about, like, a lot of the characters not interacting with Cordelia after Cordelia matured, but, you know.
Yeah. I feel like seeing Wesley and Giles after Wesley was on Angel for a little while would have been a lot of
yeah.
fun to watch.
Yeah. I just really wanted Giles to do a guest star on Angel. That's basically what I'm saying. Missed opportunity.
They basically decide they don't know that they're looking in the right place, and Cordelia closes a book, and on the cover is the monster. Mm-hmm. And then we have Cordelia on the phone talking to Buffy in her hospital room, and she says it's called Der Kinderstad. And Buffy's like, who is this?
It's me. I've got your monster.
Where's Giles?
Looking up stuff.
Well, can you put him on?
Hey, I found your guy, okay? Just listen.
Right.
The name means child death. This book says that he feeds off of children by sucking the life out of them. Ugh. But anyway, afterwards, it looks like they died because they were sick.
So it did kill Tina.
Yeah, that's my take. Because it would be looking at the children's ward as basically an all-you-can-eat kind of thing, you know?
Packer was curing the kids and taking away the Kinderstad's food.
Hence the sausage.
I found a picture of how it kills. Let me talk to him.
Oh, ew.
What?
Ow. You should see this thing. The way it does this thing, I mean, ew. Why do I let you guys drag me into this stuff?
And Giles gets on the phone and finishes telling Buffy about how it sits atop the prey and pins them down and draws the life out of them. And Buffy kind of goes into a trance. Willow sees her do this and takes the phone and just says bye and hangs up. She might say talk to you later or something, but
She says thanks.
Does she say thanks? Okay.
No, she says thanks and hangs up. Oh, but yeah, like Buffy, the flashbacks finally finish in this moment, right? Buffy is just like, this is when we finally have young Buffy pull back the curtain and see Celia pinned down and like screaming, and she's just like, help, help, and then there's like the empty hall, right? That again, you know, the hospital never has anybody around when you need them. But like, it's like this built up, like it's this payoff that this is Buffy's time. Like, she's like, yes, now I have a reason to kill this demon. She was already hunting the demon.
yeah, she was already going to take care of it, but Buffy decides that she needs to get her fever back so she can see it.
Yeah, she determines that was the reason she could see it before. Now, here's what I want to talk about. Not very long, but just why is this a thing? They talk about how this demon specifically targets kids, and like that's what they want, right? They you know, feed off of children by sucking the life force out of them. That's what this demon does. And so it lingers around hospitals, I guess, because it can kill them and people just assume it's their illness, but it's an invisible demon. So I don't know why it's trying to cover its tracks. I mean, it could just feed off of kids randomly and be like, you know, whatever, they're not going to catch me.
Yeah, no one would ever figure it out.
But it's especially weird that, why would it pick a hospital as its stalking ground if anybody who has a fever can see it? Because it turns out a lot of people in the hospital tend to run fevers on occasion. And if it's the fever that causes them to see the demon, why is that where it's hanging out?
That's a very good point.
Anyway, rant over.
I did not even think of that, but it makes complete sense. Okay, so Buffy and Willow go back to Dr. Backer's office, which is still not locked, still completely open. They go into the mini fridge where all his viruses and chemicals and stuff are kept, and Buffy grabs a vial to drink. Buffy starts to drink it. Willow's like, no, and that's 100% pure. It'll kill you in an instant. And she's like, oh. So Willow says it needs to be diluted, which I don't know how Willow knows all this stuff about this vial. Like, it's not like it's labeled 100% pure or something.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, Buffy grabs like what is seemingly like a random vial out of this.
How does she know this isn't the virus that she has?
How does she know that this is the thing that she needs to take? How does she, like, she talks about, oh, they should put that on the label. I was just like, clearly, like, there's...
Yeah. And here's what I don't get. Willow tells her it has to be diluted. So not only does she grab a beaker that is randomly sitting there that could have been used for anything and not been washed, she also grabs an open bottle of water from inside the fridge. So are we just assuming that Dr. Backer kept his drinking water in the same fridge with his viruses? Because I would think that this water bottle has like something mixed in it. Like it was like there for a reason. Why would you just think that was okay to drink? But they do.
Yeah.
They pour it in this beaker that has God knows what in it, then pour some drops from the vial in it, and Buffy drinks it.
Yeah.
Little cocktail.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. None of that is smart.
There's also, I know there's science behind this in that you can have things administered both through ingestion and IV, but like the kid...
I get that.
The kid was done through the IV, and then Buffy just drinks it. But my understanding is that it takes a little bit longer if you ingest it versus doing the IV. So, like...
Oh my gosh, yeah. I have literally have in my notes, how did this fever...
How did she get that fever
come
so
back
fast?
this fast?
Yeah. Like, it's like
she can't walk when they're leaving the office because their fevers come back. And I'm like, really? So, I mean, if she took a virus, it would take a little while, possibly days, to make her sick.
Yeah. Especially
not like immediately.
One that's assumed to be similar to what she's already had and built antibodies for.
Yes. Then they go to the children's ward and Buffy looks in and oh no, there's no children. They're gone.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. They've probably been kidnapped because nobody watches them. Then we see Ryan in like some kind of basement or corridor or something, and he's leading the kids behind him, and they're coughing and wheezing and struggling to walk because they're all sick.
Yeah.
And that's described much more. That's described much better in the script book than it shows in the episode. Of the episode, you're kind of wondering why these kids are in the hospital.
It kind of looks like...
Because they're acting fine.
It kind of looks like just a ragtag team of monster hunters. It feels like an episode of Stranger Things.
Yeah. Ryan's basically like, shh, it's not going to find us down here. Although I'm assuming that's actually where it lives. So...
Yeah. There's not a lot of reasoning to Ryan's plan.
Yeah, but he's also like 7.
Yeah.
So. Buffy and Willow are standing there trying to figure out what they should do, but, you know, Buffy's all sick again now and can't decide anything. And then she looks in there and she sees the monster, and he sniffs around the room, and Buffy tries to get in but can't, and the monster goes to the door that says basement access in the children's ward and walks out of it, and smiles back at Buffy as he does it.
Oh yeah, like that little look and that little
scary.
Like removing his hat and just like it's so
Creepy.
gentleman-esque, right? Like I think in a way he's more gentlemanly than the gentlemen are because he's got just that great suit and then that hat. Like, oh, the hat.
Yeah. And Buffy's like, we've got to get to him. Give me a second. We'll get him because she's still sick. And then Dr. Wilkinson comes and is like, Buffy, what's wrong? And decides to get her back in bed because she's sick again. And Buffy is kind of like Dr. Wilkinson is like dragging Buffy down the hall, which I don't think something a doctor would do. And Buffy says no and shoves the doctor and takes off down the hall with Willow. And Dr. Wilkinson reaches for the phone and calls for security to the children's ward. Security. And I'm like, why? Why wouldn't she call like some nurses or orderlies or a doctor with a tranquilizer or even psych department? Why is she calling security? So Buffy and Willow go around a corner and they look up and they immediately see Creepy Dawn and another security guard running toward them. Okay, so first of all, I'm not even going to go into how the security guards got there so fast. But the security guards come up on these 2 teenage girls. Dawn starts slapping his billy club in his arm, saying, come on now, let's make this easy. Now, first... these security guards have absolutely no idea who they're looking for, why they're looking for them, or what the situation is. All they know is they were called to the children's ward. That's it. But they immediately go to attack 2 teenage girls as soon as they see them because that's the only thing it could be because no one else is in this hospital. Like, it makes no sense. And it really, this is the part that frustrates me the most because a security guard that acted like that would be fired so fast. Like, I mean, this security guard, he's fixing to start beating on a fever patient for no reason that he knows of. So then Willow decides to help, and she starts screaming about frogs on her, attacking her. Interesting note, in the script book, she yells about bats, not frogs.
Oh,
but it's frogs.
That must have been an onset decision because she has frog fear. That is a callback to her frog fear epiphany that comes back this time, and I think only this time.
Buffy takes off, and Dr. Wilson shows up and is like, not her, the other one. Because they automatically know what they're supposed to be doing. It makes no sense. It really, this whole scene frustrates me. But then they let go of Willow.
Yeah, you gotta love Willow's delivery, though.
Oh, yes.
No more frogs.
They let go of Willow and they take off running after Buffy. And then that's it. We never see them again.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that they get tired of running and, like, go to have a snack. I don't know.
Yeah, they go and hang out in the records room.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's where they hang out.
Yeah.
Okay, so Buffy staggers into view to Xander, and his first thing, he's like, did Angel get in? He is determined to protect her from Angel. As far as he's concerned, Angel is the only bad guy right now, which makes sense because Xander's obsessed with Angel.
Yeah.
Buffy says, no, we have to get to the basement. And then we cut back to the kids, and Ryan is telling the kids, it's okay, we're going to be safe here. And then all of a sudden, the Kinderstadt is behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Der Kinderstadt. I assume that's German, right?
I would assume. I kind of want a spin-off series of Ryan, because this is, even though his plan isn't the most thought out, the fact that he takes the time to, like, reassure the other kids. I think he takes off his coat and gives it to one of the other kids at one point. Like, he's just a little hero. I love him.
Xander is helping Buffy down into the basement. Xander says, you don't know how to kill this thing. And she says, I thought I might try violence.
Worth a shot.
Yeah. We have Kinderstadt lifting Ryan into the air and then throws him down and is going to suck the life out of him. And this is where the creepiness of Kinderstadt just disappears and is not scary at all anymore to me. His eyes elongate from his head and have sucker things on the end and, like, go down toward the child's face, which obviously would be scary.
Yeah.
But it's just so cheesy. I'm like, he was way scarier before.
So here's the thing, though. The eye thing is weird and not a great effect. But I don't think I've ever noticed this before. But if you watch as he's, like, descending on Ryan, he just, like, is, like, drooling out of his mouth. And it is the grossest thing. And, like, that upped the creepy factor back for me. I was just like, nope, it's still creepy. Because I was just focused on that mouth.
Yeah, you also saw it when you were 11, though. I was grown up.
Yeah, like, this is the first time I've noticed that drool, though. That drool this time, because I remembered the weird 2B eye things. I remembered that part of this demon.
See, I had forgotten those. And, like, when I was watching this, I was like, he is really one of the most creepy demons. Yeah. And then that happened, and I was like, I forgot about that. That's awful. That's awful. Why'd they do that?
I was prepared for that, but then when I was watching that, I was just like, oh my god, he's just drooling over this kid. He's so excited to just chomp down on his life force. And I'm just like, oh, that's, ooh.
Yeah.
Like, if they just had that, like, had some kind of, like, weird transfer of energy or something like that, where they didn't actually have to have that thing come out of his eyes. But just have him, like, lean over and, like, that constant smile that he has, and then that drool, that would have been awful.
So, right as he's doing this to Ryan, Buffy comes in and hits him with a 2x4 and says, you make me sick, which I just feel is, like, very punny. Just perfectly punny. Buffy and Kinderstadt start fighting, and Xander gets the kids out, and he turns around to look, and it's a really cool imagery of Buffy fighting nothing.
Yeah.
Which is good. And then Kinderstadt knocks her down, and starts doing the eye things to her, which I'm guessing she's still enough of a child that he can do her life force.
I guess. I mean,
because
she has
she's not an adult.
She talks about earlier. She's just like, I'm not that grown up. I'm not a grown up to the kid. So maybe, yeah. Maybe Der Kinderstad like believes in like the legal age of 18. So since Buffy's still just 17, she counts.
Yeah. So the eyes bulge out and they go down to get Buffy, and she reaches up and twists and breaks his neck. And I absolutely love this part because it's not in the episode, but in the script book she says, and the winner is Power Girl. Which I love and I think should have really been in the episode.
That warms my heart.
Right? Shouldn't that have been in the episode?
That would have made all of those awful flashbacks worth it.
Yeah. I don't know why they cut that part out.
Aw, makes me sad. Yeah, I think like it's very awkward though. What we actually get is very awkward. Like for the buildup of this demon, the fact that it's just like a simple like snapping of the neck and then he's just gone and then it's just like, all right, cool. And then they leave him there, which only people with fever can see the body, right? Like even after it's dead, Xander still can't see it. So like, How does that work? Do you have to be able to see it to physically interact with it, or is somebody going to be like walking around down in the basement and trip over it?
Yeah. Like I'm assuming maintenance people and janitors and stuff go in this basement. And I actually have in my notes, they just leave the body there. I wonder who's going to find it. So then we are into the next day, and Buffy's are, I guess, a few days later, because I'm guessing Dr. Wilkinson did not let her go home anytime soon. Might have had put her in the psych department for a few days. So we are in Buffy's room, and Joyce is bringing her food and trying to spoil her a little bit. Peanut butter with extra jelly and with the crust cut off. And she gives it to Buffy, who is laying in bed with Xander and Willow. And Buffy asks about the juice and then says, but I wanted crunchy. And I ordered extra jelly. And Willow's like, while you're up, could I get a refill of my drink? And then Xander's like, oh, and another bag of cheesy chips. Which, as a mom, I so get this because Joyce said you ate the last one. And Xander's like, no, I saw another bag hidden behind the raisins. And as a mom, I'm like, yep, she hid them chips.
I just wrote in my notes, this is why teenagers are the worst.
Yep. I have a house full of little boys. I totally get her hiding the chips.
Well, like, I have so had this experience of like, oh, I'm putting all this extra effort to do something really special for these kids. And they're just like, but I wanted this. And can I also have this? And I want this as well. And you're just like, all right.
Yep. And then Joyce stops. She goes to do all this stuff. She stops at the door and turns back, pulls an envelope out of her pocket and hands it to Buffy, saying this came in the mail. And Buffy's like, oh, it's from Ryan. Don't know how Ryan got her address or anything. But she opens the letter, pulls out the paper, and Joyce said, oh, he drew you a picture. Isn't that nice? And it's a picture of Buffy with Power Girl written on her shirt, which I'm guessing I didn't look at it that closely in the episode. Is that written on her shirt?
I didn't actually look at the picture that closely, so I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't either. The script book says it is, but I do know it's a picture of Buffy standing on top of a dead demon that's supposed to be Der Kinderstad. Uh-huh. And Joyce just kind of looks at it like, oh, wow, that's weird. And my very last note for this episode is, really, Joyce? Really? Because this is another big clue about why she wanted to stay in the hospital and that this little boy is sending her this and everything. It's just, yeah. And that is the end of the episode.
Aw, full of really Joyce.
There's a lot of really Joyce in my notes. Just because
really
she should
Joyce.
have caught on by now.
Yeah. We won't have much more of this, but still.
Oh, yeah. Just like, what, 3 more episodes till she finds out?
Oh, really, Joyce? Yeah. Like, I don't really have a lot. Like, this episode is such a standalone episode. There's some shoehorn stuff that kind of advance the season arc, but not really. It just kind of mentions a couple things about passion and then continues with that lingering thread of Angelus. But it's such a standalone episode, and I feel like I want to like this episode more than I do. And that's where I always land with this. Like, I like the vibe that it's going for. And like I mentioned Stranger Things before, like it kind of has that vibe in places. Like that Stranger Things-esque vibe and that alternate reality vibe. Even though it's all in our current world, there's so many things that is weird about the hospital. There's so many things that's weird about Buffy and her history and her mental state and everything, that it kind of has that vibe, but it falls flat and becomes just that Monster of the Week episode that's so standalone, and it's like an episode I haven't bothered to revisit in such a long time because I just remember it being kind of lackluster when you get down to it.
Yeah, there's very, very little continuity in it.
It's definitely not one that you have to watch to get the season arc for sure. But it has some good Xander and it has some amazing Cordelia.
Yeah, it does have some very good Xander and Willow. So a lot of Joyce being oblivious to her daughter's life.
A lot of Joyce being a not character.
Yeah. Well, that was our episode.
Yes. Next week's episode is I Only Have Eyes for You. Which is an episode that I'm really excited to, like, deeply analyze. Like,
Are you? Because I don't remember it as being that impressive of an episode.
Yeah.
I remember it as being kind of like,
Yeah, I think this is gonna be an episode that also makes me have lots of Bangel feels.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of these episodes that I've thought that about, I end up having so many things to say. And the episodes that I'm like, oh man, I'm going to talk about this one for hours. I'm like, okay, well, here's what happened. I guess we'll see. I don't remember I Only Have Eyes for You as being that impressive, but I guess we'll see when I go to watch it critically.
Yeah. What I do know is that is the episode that convinced Joss Whedon that David Boreanaz was good enough to carry his own show. So we'll be watching. We'll be watching David Boreanaz's performance in that one for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, it's still like a whole nother season before he gets his own show.
All right. Thank y'all all so much for listening, and we will be back next week. This is where we say bye.
Bye. That would have been cool if we had an episode in like season 6 or something where she runs into Ryan again. And he's like become a rogue demon fighter or something.
What's a rogue demon?
Yeah. I love it that you get my Buffy references when I say stuff. Because I like say them around the house to Adam all the time and he'll just look at me. Because I made him watch through the whole series with me, but he's only done it once.
Yeah.
And so he'll just stare at me and I'll be like, never mind.